This video was way longer than I actually wanted it to be, so I'm going to keep the intro insanely short. Basically, I'm just going through every single character that's currently playable and giving my 100% honest opinion. If you disagree with my opinion, good. That means you have your own opinion and you're not just following what everyone else says. Everyone has their own favorite characters, everyone has their own least favorite characters. Feel free to discuss down in the comments which characters you like the most and why, and all I ask is that you're all just civil towards one another. After all, I just want my community here to be a group of people who come together to enjoy the same game. And I'm also making this video because a lot of times I'll get questions of, oh, do you like this character? Do you like that character? Who's your favorite? So this should answer all of those questions. We're gonna be starting this off with Albedo, and when he first dropped, I thought, well, he has an elevator, so that's kind of cool, I guess, and that's as far as that went. I never personally wanted him, but now with the Cinnabar Spindle, and especially because I'm doing the swords only account, I'm actually a lot more interested in pulling for him, and if you've been watching that, you'll know I am trying to get him. So I can't say too much one way or the other because I obviously haven't played with him yet, but I do think he's a lot more fun now. Aloy, being a bow user and also being cryo, is very much overshadowed by Ganyu, because why would you use her over Ganyu unless you just really like her character? And personally, I'm not a huge fan, so I mean, I don't have a Ganyu, but I would rather use a Ganyu. I have Aloy, I'm not using Aloy. I don't have Ganyu, but I would use Ganyu if I did have one. I really want to like Amber, I do. The problem is she needs help. I know you can build her, and people have argued like, oh, I did this much damage with her, and that's great. I mean, use whoever you want, but she really could use a buff. The Baron Bunny takes forever to actually explode, and then her burst only lasts a couple seconds, so she doesn't really provide much value. And if I want a pyro user on my team, she's not very great at applying pyro. Barbara is a pretty decent healer, I must admit, though I get annoyed using her because if you fight any cryo enemy, you're going to get frozen over and over and over again. I also have to say, personally, her singing idle animation annoys me. I hear it too often if I do actually use her, and of all the idle animations, it's one of the ones that I just swap the character off immediately to end it so I don't have to listen to it. With Beidou, I really like her design. I know some people say there's not that much to it, and to some extent I agree, but I still think it fits her and her personality. I don't think she's a very over-the-top person, so it seems accurate to me. In terms of her kit, I do like the counter aspect of her skill. It's not really a counter, but you know, it's a shield, and then you take damage and you dish damage back, so it's kind of like a counter in that sense, which is really fun to use. Now, of course, she doesn't work well with Raiden Shogun if you're using Raiden Shogun as a main DPS, and that's really unfortunate, and I think that's my only gripe with this character as someone who uses Raiden Shogun a lot. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but with Bennett, I kind of find him boring just because he's there to provide a damage buff and potentially heals as well, and that's all he does. He comes out, he uses his skill to generate some particles, puts down the burst, and then swaps out. I'm a huge fan of doing big damage, obviously, but with Bennett, I wish there was more than just being the provider of extra damage for other people. I understand that some characters in the game need to just add some sort of value, like being able to give other characters the chance to shine, but I remember when I first got Bennett, before I knew metas or anything like that, I didn't use him because I just didn't find him fun. I think the idea behind Chongyun is really cool, him being an exorcist with a ton of positive energy, but he's just not that fun to use because he infuses everything with cryo, which kind of ruins a lot of comps, and overall I just almost never touch him. The only time I did touch him was before I knew of any metas on my first account, when I got him as a character and just tested him. Now, I don't personally have a Diluc, but from my time of testing him out in trials, he does seem kind of fun, and I like the fact that you can use his elemental skill 3 times because most characters use it once and then you have to wait for it to come off of cooldown. That kind of adds a different element to his playstyle which other characters don't have. Now we're on to Diona, and and I'm just gonna be straight up honest here. I don't like her. I have her on my main, and I know she's a good shielder, a good heal. Well, she's an alright healer, and she provides a good shield. I just don't want to use her. I guess it's partially because I like characters that can deal damage, and she's kind of there for the shield or the heal, and that's about it. But at the same time, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really care for the quote-unquote lolly characters that we have in game. I'm just not a big fan of any of them. Eula was the character that I really didn't care too much about until I tested her out on her rerun, and well, I ended up pulling for her because I just liked her playstyle that much. I'm not the biggest fan of physical damage builds on characters because I like doing a lot of elemental reactions. However, with Eula, I just really love her animations with her attacks and how she performs all of them, and I know she's capable of doing a lot of damage, so I'm excited to build her out and play around with her, especially because I have Raiden Shogun and the two of them pair really well together. Fischl is a character I don't have on any account with the exception of one account that is like AR5 or something because, well, I'm not gonna get into that here, but we might see a bow only playthrough someday maybe, and that's what I would use that account for. I know the majority of her playtime is off-field and you just utilize Oz for the electro reactions, but I do want to get one to pair up with my Raiden Shogun so I could put them on the same team and have essentially an infinite burst comp. I do enjoy her tsundere-esque personality. My only thing that I don't like is that with her burst, it doesn't feel that satisfying to use. I don't really need to say much for Ganyu because I don't have her, and it's pretty obvious I want her. I love her design. I love that she's half Adepti or Adeptus. I know singular, plural, whichever one you want to go with. And she's capable of doing a lot of damage, as we all know. Plus, I do enjoy the shy personality that she has, and yeah, I want her on my team. Hu Tao was a character that was really hard for me to skip because I do enjoy how she plays the big damage, a lot of pyro, just a really fun character. You just go in, you slap around some enemies. One thing that stopped me from pulling for her was the fact that her C1 is just so valuable, and I knew I wasn't going to get that or the Staff of Homa, so I didn't pull for her. But I do think that her kit is really fun. I also enjoy her personality. Jean to me is one of those characters that doesn't really seem to do all that much in game. I mean, she has her skill, which kind of sucks in enemies and then blasts them off in whatever direction you aim it in, and then the burst is a heal, so she doesn't necessarily see a ton of use in, let's say, the meta. But once again, I don't really care about the meta, and I did have her on one of my accounts. I got her to C1, and she is fun to use. I want to get her again on my main or on the sword only account so I can once again build her up and actually build her correctly this time. But on top of all that, she really does look like Saber from Fate Stay Night, which was one of the first animes I ever watched, so there's a little bit of a soft spot there. Kazuha is another one of those characters that I don't have, but he looks fun just because of the value he brings with his swirl, and I would really like to get him on the sword only account so I can make use of him there as well. But I do like the whole Canadian aesthetic that he's got going on, even if he does look a little bit more pyro than Animo. Kai's one of those characters I never used too much until I had to use him in the sword only account, and he's actually pretty fun to use. If you can keep his burst up most of the time, he's pretty good at applying cryo in a short range around him. And in terms of his personality, I actually like the fact that he's a really manipulative person. That might be a weird thing to say, but I just enjoy that aspect of characters in shows or in games. Ayaka is another character that I would really like to get, and unfortunately I didn't have that option on my main account because it didn't exist at that time. She's really good at traveling on the surface of water, but she's also just a really solid cryo DPS character. I do enjoy her personality as well, and if there's something I had to say I didn't like, it would be the fact that MiHoYo still hasn't addressed the issue that both Mona and Ayaka's dashes get stuck on literally everything, and it just gets really annoying to travel with them. Keqing was actually one of the characters when I first started playing that I wanted to get most because I saw her plastered on the standard banner, and I was like, I want that character or Mona. But of course at the time I thought her name was Keqing because I didn't really know pronunciations too well back then. I still do want to get her, but on my main I use the Raiden Shogun, and I think I would still use Raiden Shogun over Keqing, which is why I really want to get her on my sword only account so that I can use her as one of my main DPSs over there, and I think that'd be really fun. And of course she is kind of a tsundere as well, and for some reason I tend to like the tsundere tsundere characters in games and anime. Klee, once again, is a bit of a lolly character, and as I stated already, for some reason I'm just not the biggest fan of them. I don't know. I will say, however, it is funny to watch them swim. Like, their swimming animations, it just looks like they're flailing in the water, and I love that. Another thing I will say is that in the Genshin Impact ad where she says the whole Spark Knight, whatever, Klee thing, you know, whatever she says there, I hate that ad. I find it so annoying personally. Kujo Sara is a character I really want to be a fan of, but I just not. I love her design. I think that's great, but she's just kind of a very niche Bennett, and I already gave my thoughts on Bennett. I'm not a huge fan of buffing characters, even though I will use them obviously to buff my team. I have much more fun playing SE characters that actually do damage, and yes, you could build her as a DPS character. You could build anyone as DPS, but I wanted to use her with Raiden Shogun, and the C2, you really need it to make her shine at all. I mean, shine is maybe even too much of an exaggeration there. To get value out of her, you really want that C2, but then the issue is if you utilize the buff from C2, you don't actually get energy particles, which then kind of hurts your rotation. So while I really want to like this character, I'm just not that big of a fan of her. Speaking of characters that I want to be a big fan of, Lisa. I like her design. I think a lot of people like her design, but one thing I don't like is that her burst pushes enemies away if they're lighter enemies. The heavier ones don't get pushed away, but it's just annoying because if I try and use her in comps, I already don't like Overloaded because that pushes enemies away, and then if she's zapping them with that, it just spreads them all out, and unless you have a character to bring them all back together like Venti or even Sucrose, it's just kind of a nuisance. That being said, I still keep going back and trying to build her up and then taking the artifacts back off of her once I realize once again why I don't have her built. Mona, a character that I wanted since the beginning of this game. She is kind of a tsundere, so I mean that already is playing towards me. She kind of has twin tails going on. She's a mage or witch, wizard, you know, witch is kind of the female of wizard, but I feel like witch usually has a negative connotation, so I still like wizard more, but it's whatever. And whenever I play games like RPGs, anything like that, back when I used to play Skyrim, magic was always my go-to class, so she looks like the stereotypical mage, and I really like that. So everything about her character plays towards me, plus she allows you to do even bigger numbers, and you can build her as a main DPS, and it's not like a completely terrible idea. Though I will say her elemental skill isn't my favorite. It is just a taunt, and it's not that fun, but I can look past that because there's so much else about her that I like. Except I also need MiHoYo to fix the whole sprinting issue because I literally cannot travel the world on her. I have to swap off of her character and only use her in combat or to travel over water. Ningguang's a character I definitely want to build someday. I haven't really invested in her too much on any account, but I know she's capable of doing some really solid damage. I want to get some constellations for her on my main, and then I might build her up on there eventually. Her attacks are a little on the slow side, but I think she more than makes up for that with the fact that she can do so much damage by herself. I really like Noelle's design. I mean, I like her character. The issue I have is I find her boring to play as. She has a shield, and then her burst just lets her do more normal attacks. It just infuses her sword with Geo, and then she swings the sword just as if you weren't using the burst. So personally, I don't have that much fun playing on her, though I will say I do enjoy the animations from her burst. I love that the sword just becomes huge and it's just glowing, and I think that is really cool. But in terms of playstyle, I don't find her quite as fun, though if I ever get a C6 Noelle, I would like to test her out and then, you know, revisit my opinion on her. I'm about to jinx myself for the sake of this video, but I have never lost a 50-50 to Chi-Chi, and I know that's kind of like the running joke within the Genshin community. So I'm probably gonna get a Chi-Chi soon now, but I personally have never had one, and as I've said, not the biggest fan of lolly characters, but if I get her on the sword only account, I'm 100% using her, and on any account I would probably just test her out to see how she works, but I'm not the biggest fan. Yes, just just yes. Raiden Shogun, more specifically A, is I think my favorite character in the game design-wise. I mean, I don't know if I can necessarily call a tsundere, but it's just fun in the story when you get to see those moments where she's not just like a tyrant and she actually has feelings and a much softer side. I really love her burst. I love the elemental skill. I have fun playing her. She can be DPS, she can be a battery, she has so many uses, and the only thing that is a downside is the fact that she and Beidou don't really work together if you're running Raiden Shogun as a main DPS, but I'm gonna look past that because I just love this character so much. I personally have never used Razor, but I'm pretty sure the normal build is kind of a physical DPS build, and other than Eula, I'm not the biggest fan of running physical DPS on characters because, as I said, I just enjoy the elemental reactions, though I will say that I think his Stan is pretty cool looking. Rosaria was a character that I never wanted to get, and I wasn't really interested at all just because personally she looks like she's dead to me. She looks like more of a zombie than Chi-Chi does. But having gotten her to I believe I'm at C6 now on my main somehow, I pretty much had to build her just to see so it wasn't a waste. And I will say I do enjoy her more now. I think her elemental skill is really fun. I don't care for the burst as much, but the skill is really fun because you can dash away from enemies and then just teleport right behind them, hit them, run away. I kind of paired her with Mona, so I put down Mona's elemental skill, hold it to kind of back up, and then dash in with Rosaria's skill to freeze them, get behind them, and reapproach. It was a fun combination. I feel like there are two sides of the community. There are those who hate Kokomi, and there are those who love Kokomi. I'm kind of in the middle, even though I just said there are two sides, so now I'm saying there are three sides, but I can very much so see her flaws in that she doesn't really focus on one thing. She's kind of a healer, but also kind of damage, but then the negative crit makes her not damage, so it's kind of confusing. But I'm gonna be honest, I enjoy using her. I know she's maybe not the most efficient character, but like I've said, I don't focus on the meta, and I do have her at C1, but it's just fun that you get to heal up your entire team at the same time as doing decent enough damage. So when she's on my team, she literally never dies, and pretty much no one dies. Oh look, what do we have here? Another lolly. Yeah, not a big fan. She's a nice taxi, and I've never used her for anything except for being a taxi. And personally, I don't plan to use her for anything else. I'm sure some people would call me a hypocrite here because I said that I liked Ganyu's personality, and Ganyu is a bit more on the shy side. I don't want to say it rubs me the wrong way, but she's like too shy, if that makes any sense. Like, it's almost annoying. If you like her, more power to you, but personally, I'm just not the biggest fan. Swirl is always fun, though without constellations, you could argue she's not as useful, though you could say that about a lot of characters, so I guess that's not really the best argument. So I guess all I can really say is, personally, from playing with her and from her design aspect, I'm just not the biggest Sucrose fan. Tartaglia, a character I don't have despite him having like 800 reruns already. However, I will say his skill is really fun. I really like using his elemental skill more than the burst or anything. Like, it is so fun to be in the melee stance and just have that crazy AoE. It'd be fun to pair him up with the Raiden Shogun and just smack enemies around. However, I hate the fact that the longer you're in the melee stance, the longer the cooldown will be, because I'd much rather spend all my time in the melee stance. So Toma, he's a pyro shielder who kind of is very niche. He can be used in other circumstances, but his primary use is most likely to be put alongside Hu Tao, and I don't have Hu Tao, so I don't have Toma. And even if I did have Hu Tao, I don't really know that I would want to have Toma. I'm just not really the biggest fan. I think his character is fine. I just don't love his playstyle. All right, with the Travelers, we're going to break this down into Animo, Geo, and Electro, since those are the elements you can currently switch them to. As Animo, I think that they're alright. It's fun to do swirl damage, see a lot of elemental reactions. You could put the set of Verdescent Vernier on them and, Animo Shred and all that good stuff. The burst is kind of annoying because for small enemies, it takes them away, so you can't keep hitting them. And also, you can't really aim where you want it to go, which oftentimes just ends up making it go the wrong direction. Geo, I think I've made this very clear in the sword only playthrough. I do not like the Geo Traveler for combat. For movement, it's great, sure. For combat, I don't like it. I'd much rather have Animo because it, AoE and all that good stuff. Now, I haven't used the Electro versions in a long time, but from what I remember, the elemental skill has a very long cooldown, and that just kind of disappointed me because I like spamming elemental skills and bursts, and I know that there are good batteries, so they help other characters do that, but it was just kind of disappointing to see that the skill would have such a long cooldown between uses, especially since I think the skill itself is pretty cool that you're throwing like electro shurikens. I'm gonna make this super simple for Venti. He is a swirl enabler, he's an AoE enabler, it's great. I don't have him, but I think he'd be really fun to use in Spiral Abyss to just clump the enemies together and then smack them around with everyone else. So we have Xianling here, right? And I'm gonna be honest with you guys. In terms of her kit, the burst is great, amazing pyro application. Guoba is kind of annoying in my opinion because you put it down and then if the enemy moves, it's useless. And also if that's your main source of pyro, then you don't really have much until her burst comes up. Back when I first tested out Xiao, I had no idea what I was doing because I didn't know what his kit was, and it just felt unsatisfying because I would press the elemental skill, the burst, and I felt like I wasn't really seeing any difference other than him putting on the mask. Now that I know what he does, I think it would be really fun to build him well and then just have the infinite plunges and do tons of damage. So I wouldn't mind getting him at some point in the future, but I don't think I'm necessarily going to be pulling for him, though I mean, I never know. Full transparency, I am not a huge fan of Xingqiu's design. I don't really care for his character. However, I cannot deny his value. He's an amazing Hydro enabler, probably the best in the game, and as I've said with some other characters, I really want him on the sword only account because he would be game changing. Shinyan, MiHoYo, please buff this. No. You don't have to buff this character. I mean, you can buff this character if you want. That'd be great too. But fix this character. Please. Her elemental skill has been bugged since day one of her being in the game, and they still have not fixed it. For those of you who don't know, when you activate her shield, it's supposed to activate at a different level depending on how many enemies you hit with it, and that doesn't really happen. I've wanted to build her on my main account a few times just for fun, but I keep stopping myself short because I know that she's bugged and that just bothers me. Like, if MiHoYo doesn't care to make the character function as intended, then why should I invest in the character? Though I will say I've seen some artwork of her with her hair down and I actually really like that, so I know it's again with the hair, but I'm just saying. Also, I had no idea that in the English dub she has a country accent for some reason. I play on the Japanese dub, so I didn't know that that was a thing, but I much prefer the Japanese dub to the English. No hate towards voice actors or anything, I just don't really love the country accent on her. The only time I had Yanfei was on the first account I ever made, and I didn't know what I was doing back then, so I don't think I invested much in her at all, or if I did, it was probably the worst investment you could ever put in. But I would love to get her again in the future and build her up because I think that she's really fun. She spams the charge attacks, she can do quite a lot of damage because she has really high multipliers. And I also do like her design. Yoimiya is a character that I want. I really want Yoimiya on my main to pair with the Raiden Shogun. I know I said I don't like the overloaded, but because she uses a bow, it's not as big of an issue. The reason that I really like her is because she applies pyro to her normal attacks, so you don't just have to aim in and shoot like most of the other bow characters. And I think that that is just a really fun kind of play style. And I do like her outfit. I like the design. I like her personality, so I would love to get her in the future. All right, you guys ready for this one? I don't think you're ready for this one. Zhongli, the Geo Archon. A lot of people absolutely love this character, and I'm not really one of them. I think design-wise, perfectly fine. I think the voice actors did a great job with him. I love all that stuff, lore, all that, it's great. When it comes to playstyle, I am not the biggest fan. He puts up a shield, and that, for the most part, is what people use him for. He's there for the absolutely overpowered shield that has nearly infinite uptime. Obviously, he can also drop a meteor on characters, and he can lower resistances and all that is great, but I just don't like that he's there as a shield. If he does come back up in a rerun, I'd be slightly tempted to grab him based on what other banners are coming up around that time, just because he has a really strong shield, which is really beneficial for a lot of characters. But at the same time, I don't know that I would get him because I just don't love the playstyle. I think it really takes away from some of the stakes in battle. Like, you put up this shield and then for the time that the shield is up, you really don't have to worry about anything. So apparently, if you stayed till the end, the only thing that you've learned is I'm not a big fan. I cannot believe I said it that many times.